In my home country of Brazil, there's a particular habitat called a restinga. It's a distinct type of coastal forest, and in the habitat, there's a flowering plant called a cluja. Clujas are small to medium-sized trees that have a fragrant smell and evergreen foliage. The fruit is a leathery capsule that opens and reveals red or orange seeds. This fleshy, light green, sweet-smelling fruit entices you to consider partaking of it until you realize with disappointment that it's not edible. It has a flaw. It's not edible and can't be enjoyed to its fullest potential. So what value does it hold in its environment? For the past 17 years, I've been a speech-language pathologist. I work with individuals with communication disorders, and those are disorders that can take many forms and range in severity. It can be present at birth or acquired later in life through trauma or brain injury, for example. I love my field and the work that I do, and every time I approach working with a new child or family, I remember something that one of my grad school professors instilled in me. She helped me see people as individuals. And she helped me to value their strengths and abilities in a world that's often unforgiving when it comes to deviations from the norm. By society standards, many of the children I serve are viewed as flawed. Something about them makes them different and less than society's perfect. Sometimes these differences are clearly visible, but other times, nothing from the outside indicates a difference. They're like those clujas, beautiful and sweet, and yet less than perfect by deep-rooted standards. For example, in certain cultures, children born with a cleft lip or cleft palate are completely ostracized. In one particular country, children born with a cleft are often named machek, which literally means deformed. So every single day, they are reminded they're different. They hear, deformed, come here. Deformed, it's time for bed. Deformed, don't hit your sister. This difference separates them from society. And because many of these children have limited access to medical services and resources, they often go untreated into childhood, adolescence, sometimes even adulthood. The family is viewed as cursed, and they are shunned and shamed. The good news is there is one humanitarian organization that I know of reaching out to these children and families. They perform the needed surgeries free of charge, and the most beautiful thing they do at the end of the process, when the children are in recovery, is they give them a new name no longer tied to their previous condition, but tied to a new identity. In the US alone, cleft lip with or without cleft palate is the second most common birth defect, resulting in more than 400,000 cases a year. My husband was one of those cases back in 1967. He was born on his mother's birthday, and when I've visited with my mother-in-law about that day, she recounts that she heard the doctor say, "There's a problem, he has a cleft." Her mind quickly flashed back to a young boy that she knew as a child who had a cleft. She also remembered that he was bullied, and she instantly felt fear. She says she was almost afraid to look at Sean, but the moment that they laid him on her belly, she was overwhelmed with love the first time that she saw him. She had no idea what lied ahead in terms of surgeries and treatment, but she knew that Sean belonged with her, and the cleft did not change that. In another part of the world, there are two particular countries that boast that they have been successful at completely eliminating Down syndrome from their countries through prenatal diagnosis. That's difficult for me to even utter out loud. People born with Down syndrome live to lead very happy and purposeful lives. And yet, the appalling and perplexing goal for these nations is a world free of Down syndrome. You see, they don't know Sarah. Sarah was born to a beautiful family who chose to see beyond a syndrome. They're not alone, as it is estimated that 250,000 families in America are affected by Down syndrome. From the time Sarah was a baby, her parents pursued help and the necessary treatments for her to develop and grow as normally as possible. It may take children with Down syndrome longer to reach developmental milestones, but eventually they meet many expected milestones with therapy and support. Sarah was also born with a hearing loss, but with each challenge they faced, she received the care and support that she needed. Now Sarah is a thriving adult and a student here at KU, and it's an absolute joy to see her reaching her potential. Sarah knows that she belongs here. In Sean's and Sarah's cases, their parents discovered their child's difference right away at birth. But for some families, it may take 2 to 3 years before something becomes apparent. When I counsel parents and develop treatment plans for children with special needs, I often try to convey that we value communication in all its forms, whether that be verbal communication, sign language, communicating through the use of an alternative augmentative device. The key for us is acknowledging and fostering communication in all its forms. I often tell parents that what their children have to communicate is far more important than how they communicate it, and that who they are inside is far more valuable than any outward challenge. In other words, we seek to value and see the person, not the disorder. I strongly believe this, but my belief was tested about 3.5 years ago. After 7 years of marriage, my husband and I welcomed a baby girl, despite the fact we were once told that it was very unlikely that I would ever conceive naturally. Then 19 months later, to our utter surprise, we welcomed a baby boy. Our joy was indescribable, and being a parent is amazing, challenging, but amazing. And when my son was 3.5 years old, he began to stutter. Though as a professional, I knew that many children, particularly boys, will go through a period of disfluent speech between the ages of 2 and 5. My internal radar went on alert. It gradually got worse, and for a period of about 4 to 5 months, the disfluencies became an evident part of his everyday conversations. Initially, I experienced shock. When your work is helping people with communication disorders, you just don't expect to face that challenge in your own home. When it persisted, I experienced fear that others would notice and draw attention to it and make him uneasy about it. Fear that play buddies would say unkind words to him. I also experienced anger. When I heard a family member say to him impatiently, "Just say it," one time when he was having a hard time getting his words out. I even experienced guilt, thinking to myself, what will people think? I was surprised at my strong wave of emotion in a relatively short amount of time in relation to the disfluencies in his speech. As a professional, I also knew that a large majority of preschool children who stutter do outgrow it, but as a parent, I was still concerned. I distinctly remember sitting in a parking lot one afternoon, feeling teary-eyed, overwhelmed, and helpless after hearing my son significantly struggle to communicate fluently. I looked at his sweet face with despair and thought to myself, what if he doesn't outgrow this? And in that moment, I realized the truth I'd preached to parents for many years, that the who is what matters. I thought to myself, even if the stuttering persists, he's still the same, cuddly, sensitive, funny, smart, active little boy that I love. He's a gift I'm privileged to enjoy every day. So I resolved in my heart that even if he continued to stutter, he would know he's loved, he's special, and that what he has to say is important. He would know that his voice matters, that his life matters, and that he belongs with us. So far, I've given you examples of children, but a communication disorder is no respecter of persons. It affects young and old, black and white, rich and poor. I want to end by telling you about my father. He was born to a humble family of 14 children in Recife, Pernambuco, in the northeast coast of Brazil. His mother was a homemaker and an avid reader and writer, and she wrote beautiful poetry. She instilled in my dad a love of learning, and his curiosity caused him to yearn for a faraway land of opportunity. He became infatuated with the United States of America, but he was not able to fulfill his dream of coming to the US as a young adult. He married, had children of his own, 10 children to be exact, but he was a visionary. And by the time that my older siblings were teenagers, he began sending them one by one as exchange students to the US. My siblings did well, entered college, married, and our family ended up divided, 5 in the US and 5 in Brazil. When I was 10, my parents worked to bring the rest of us here, and we started a new life together. Because of my dad's vision, determination, and hard work, my siblings and I grabbed hold of the opportunities that were granted to us. We've become doctors, lawyers, educators, administrators, missionaries, speech-language pathologists, each one of us fulfilling one man's dream to experience all he envisioned America would bring. Fast forward 30 years, and my dad has lost the ability to remember the important people and events in his life. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years back and has become more and more disoriented and forgetful. He's not alone, as an estimated 5.5 million Americans of all ages have Alzheimer's disease. He's no longer the strong, opinionated, cultured man that he once was. He's become quiet, reserved, often disconnected. Though we grieve the loss of the man he once was, we treasure the moments that we have with him. Moments when he recounts distant memories, old songs, my grandmother's poems. He may not be the same, but he belongs with us. So my question and challenge to us this day is, how do we practically express value to the people in our lives and to ourselves in light of the differences and imperfections we all face? I know that for me, when I have expected rejection or when I have experienced feelings that I don't belong for one reason or another, when I've been met with kindness and empathy instead, it's literally changed my life. Finally, let's return to the Clujas in the Restingas of Brazil. There are moments and seasons in life when we face events and circumstances that appear lovely, that we imagined would bring much joy and delight, and yet they bring disappointments or challenges instead. In the end, however, even that inedible fruit can be enjoyed and treasured, because walking through those challenges help us and allow us to grow and mature and learn lessons we would not have learned otherwise. You see, without the Cluja tree, some animals would not find a resting place. Without it, that particular landscape would lose the beauty of its colors. Without it, the sweet fragrance of that fruit would be missing. So that clusia belongs there. So as you think about the beautiful clusias in your life, remember they are worthy of love and belonging. They may be imperfect, but they're genuinely special. And they help us look deeper for meaning and purpose. The sobering reality is that we're all imperfect in one way or another. But even in the face of our imperfections, we have value. Thank you.